Emma Grace Thompson stood at the window of the rattling train car, her calloused hands smoothing 4-year-old Benjamin's copper hair as he slept against her shoulder. The Nebraska landscape stretched endlessly beyond the dusty wheat fields, giving way to brown hills dotted with sagebrush. Her fingers traced the worn edges of William Carson's letters in her coat pocket, each one promising a fresh start, a stable home, a father for Ben. The other passengers avoided looking at her threadbare dress and the small boy who bore no resemblance to any husband, but Emma held her chin high, whispering prayers that this leap of faith would finally give them the life they deserved. The train's whistle pierced the morning air as it approached Dry Creek Station, a cluster of weather-beaten buildings scattered like dice across the prairie. Emma gathered their few possessions, a canvas bag containing Ben's clothes, her nursing supplies from her days at St. Mary's Hospital, and the pressed wildflower Will had sent with his proposal letter. Through the window, she could see a lone figure waiting on the platform, tall but unnaturally thin, his shoulders hunched against the autumn wind. Her heart quickened with nervous anticipation as Ben stirred awake, his green eyes so like his father's, though that man had long since disappeared, blinking up at her with trust that made her chest tighten with fierce protectiveness. Will Carson stood on the platform like a scarecrow come to life, his once powerful frame now gaunt beneath clothes that hung loose as empty grain sacks. The persistent cough that had plagued him for months rattled through his chest as he watched passengers disembark, searching for the woman whose photograph showed kind eyes and gentle hands. Behind him, 8-year-old Lucy clutched a bouquet of prairie roses she'd picked at dawn, her dark braids neat despite having no mother's hands to tend them. "Papa, will she like us?" Lucy whispered, and Will forced a smile that didn't reach his fever-bright eyes, knowing that Emma Thompson was their last hope. Though he couldn't tell her that the consumption was winning, that Dr. Morrison had given him months at most. Before we continue, leave your like, share our story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she stepped off the train and saw Will clearly for the first time. This was not the robust rancher from the photograph. This was a man being slowly consumed by illness, his cheekbones sharp as knife edges, his hands trembling as he removed his hat. The sound of his cough, harsh and wet, made her nursing instincts flare with recognition and alarm. "Mrs. Thompson." His voice was barely above a whisper, and when their eyes met, she saw not deception, but desperation, and something deeper, plea for salvation he couldn't voice. Ben pressed closer to her skirts, sensing the change in his mother's posture, while Lucy stepped forward with her flowers, offering them like a peace treaty between two broken families. The wagon ride to the Carson ranch passed in strained silence, broken only by Will's increasingly violent coughing fits and Ben's whispered questions about their new home. Emma studied the landscape with a nurse's eye, noting the dry air that might actually benefit tubercular lungs, the isolation that could prevent spread of disease, the small but well-built cabin that suggested Will had once been prosperous. Lucy sat between them, chattering nervously about the chickens and the vegetable garden, her small hands constantly adjusting Will's blanket with the practiced care of a child who had become her parents' caretaker. "Mama used to say the prairie wind could heal anything if you knew how to listen to it," Lucy said, and Emma felt her heart crack at the hope in the child's voice. Inside the one-room cabin, Emma's worst fears were confirmed. The air was thick with the sweet, sickly smell of consumption, and blood-stained rags lay hastily hidden beneath the bed. Will collapsed into the single chair, his breathing labored, while Lucy began preparing supper with the efficiency of someone far older than her. 8 years. "I'm sorry," Will gasped between coughing spells. "I should have told you in the letters, but I hoped." His words dissolved into another fit that brought up bright red blood, and Emma felt the familiar surge of purpose that had once made her the finest nurse at St. Mary's. This man was dying, but he wasn't dead yet, and neither was her ability to fight death itself. That night, after settling Ben and Lucy on makeshift beds near the fire, Emma sat beside Will's cot and made her choice. "I've seen consumption before," she said quietly, her fingers checking his pulse, rapid and thready. "In the hospital wards, in the tenements. Most die because they give up, because no one fights for them." Will's eyes, glazed with fever, focused on her with difficulty. "You don't understand. Dr. Morrison says there's nothing." "Dr. Morrison isn't here," Emma interrupted, rolling up her sleeves. "I am, and I didn't come all this way to watch you die." She began sorting through her nursing supplies, her movements sure and practiced, While outside the autumn wind howled like a promise of the hard winter ahead, Emma's first critical decision came at dawn when Will's fever spiked dangerously high. She could take Ben and catch the next train east, returning to the certainty of poverty but also safety. Or she could stay and fight a battle that would likely claim not just Will but potentially her son and Lucy as well. Watching Lucy spoon broth between Will's cracked lips with the tenderness of a mother, seeing Ben peek around the doorframe with curious concern rather than fear, Emma felt something settle in her chest like an anchor finding bottom. "Lucy," she said, her voice steady with new resolve, "I need you to show me where your father keeps his medical supplies. We're going to save him." The little girl's face blazed with hope so fierce it took Emma's breath away. The transformation of the cabin began immediately. Emma opened every window despite the cold, allowing fresh prairie air to sweep away the stagnant breath of sickness. She moved Will's bed away from the fireplace, understanding that while warmth felt comforting, the constant smoke was aggravating his lungs. Lucy became her eager assistant, helping to strip and boil bedding, to prepare the special teas Emma remembered from her training: coltsfoot for the cough, elderberry for fever. Ben, too young to understand the gravity but sensing the importance, collected smooth stones from the creek to heat for Will's chest. "Are we going to make Papa better?" Lucy asked, and Emma met her eyes with the honesty the child deserved. "We're going to try our very best." Dr. Morrison arrived on the third day, summoned by curious neighbors who'd seen the smoke from the constantly boiling laundry. A portly man with kind but weary eyes, he examined Will with professional skepticism before taking Emma aside. "Mrs. Carson, I understand you were a nurse back east, but consumption is consumption. The kindest thing would be to make him comfortable and prepare the child." Emma's jaw tightened with familiar frustration. She'd heard those words too, many times in hospital wards where doctors gave up before the fight truly began. "Dr. Morrison, with respect, I've seen miraculous recoveries when patients receive proper care, nutrition, and hope. Give me 2 weeks." The doctor's eyebrows rose at her quiet authority, the steel beneath her gentle exterior that had once intimidated senior physicians. The routine Emma established was grueling but systematic. She woke before dawn to prepare Will's medications: willow bark tea for fever, steam tents with eucalyptus for his breathing, carefully measured doses of cod liver oil despite his protests. Lucy learned to assist with professional competence, taking temperatures, timing, coughing fits, recording everything in a notebook Emma had started. Ben contributed by singing the folk songs his mother had taught him, his clear voice seeming to ease Will's restless sleep. "Why are you doing this?" Will asked one evening, his voice stronger than it had been in weeks. Emma paused in her preparation of his evening medication, considering. "Because everyone deserves someone who won't give up on them," she said simply, and saw something kindle in his eyes that hadn't been there before: the fragile beginning of hope. By the end of the first week, small signs of progress emerged that filled Emma with cautious optimism. Will's coughing fits came less frequently, and when they did, they produced less blood. His appetite returned slowly, and he began sitting up for longer periods, even helping Ben with simple reading lessons. Lucy bloomed under Emma's attention, her constant anxiety giving way to the natural curiosity of childhood as she learned not just nursing techniques but also the motherly affection she'd been missing. The cabin, once a place of waiting for death, buzzed with purposeful activity and the sound of laughter. Ben's giggles as Will taught him to whittle, Lucy's excited chatter about the herbs they were growing. Emma felt the first stirrings of something she hadn't dared hope for, not just the possibility of Will's recovery, but the emergence of a real family. The bonds forming within the Carson cabin grew stronger as October painted the prairie in shades of gold and crimson. Emma found herself looking forward to quiet evenings when Will felt well enough to tell stories of his younger days, how he'd built the ranch with his own hands, his dreams of expanding the herd, the way Lucy's mother used to dance to fiddle music under the stars. Lucy began calling Emma Mama M, the name slipping out naturally as she helped with meal preparation and tended to Ben like a protective older sister. Ben, meanwhile, developed in hero worship for Will that was both touching and healing, the man's gentle patience with the boy's endless questions helping to restore his sense of purpose. "I never thought I'd want to see another spring," Will confessed one evening, and Emma felt her heart skip at the quiet wonder in his voice. As Will's strength slowly returned, he began to take on more responsibilities around the cabin, chopping wood for the fire, and teaching Ben to care for the few remaining chickens. Emma watched him carefully, noting the way his shoulders straightened with purpose, how his cough became less frequent when he had meaningful work to occupy his mind. Lucy thrived under the combined attention of both adults, her reading improving dramatically as Emma worked with her in the evenings while Will dozed by the fire. "Are you going to stay forever, Mama M?" Lucy asked one night as Emma braided her hair, and the question hung in the air like a prayer. Its answer dependent on so many things beyond their control: Will's continued recovery, the harsh winter ahead, and the growing feelings Emma was trying so hard to ignore. The first real test came when Will attempted to help Emma with the heavier household tasks. His determination to contribute led him to overexert himself, resulting in a setback that sent panic through the small household. Emma found him collapsed by the woodpile, blood frothing at his lips, his breathing shallow and ragged. As she helped him back to bed, fear clawed at her chest. Had she been fooling herself about his improvement? That night, as she kept vigil by his bedside, Will reached for her hand with fingers that trembled but gripped with surprising strength. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but Emma shook her head firmly. "Recovery isn't a straight line. Tomorrow, we'll be more careful, but we won't give up." Lucy curled up on the floor beside his bed, and Ben brought his favorite wooden horse to keep Will company, their silent support speaking louder than words. As November's chill settled over the prairie, Emma realized how deep her emotional investment had become. She caught herself humming lullabies her own mother had sung while she prepared meals, found herself automatically including Will in plans for the future, felt a fierce protectiveness toward all three members of her new family that surprised her with its intensity. When Ben came running with a scraped knee, he sought comfort from both her and Will equally, the man's gentle hands cleaning the wound while Emma applied a bandage. Lucy had begun saving her best drawings for Will's approval and seeking Emma's advice on everything from clothing to friendship troubles with the neighbor girls. The realization struck Emma like lightning. Somewhere between fighting for Will's life and creating a home for these children, she had found what she'd been searching for her entire adult life, a place where she truly belonged. Will's growing awareness of Emma's sacrifice began to trouble him as his health improved. Late one evening, as she dozed in the chair beside his bed after a particularly difficult day, he studied her face in the firelight, the shadows beneath her eyes, the way her hands bore small cuts from the constant work, the peaceful expression that made her look younger than her 26 years. "You could have had a normal marriage," he said when she stirred awake, his voice thick with guilt. "A healthy husband, a proper courtship, dancing at barn raisings instead of mixing medications." In the middle of the night, Emma's response was immediate and fierce. "Will Carson, if you think I'd trade this," she gestured around the cabin where Lucy slept peacefully and Ben's breathing came steady and warm, "for anything normal, then you understand nothing about what I want from life." The moment of true emotional commitment came during the first blizzard of winter, when the world outside disappeared behind walls of white, and the four of them were truly alone together. Trapped inside the cabin, they developed new rhythms of intimacy. Emma, teaching Lucy to sew while Will helped Ben build castles from wooden blocks, quiet conversations by lamplight about their dreams and fears, shared laughter over simple meals that tasted like feasts in the warm cocoon of their home. One night, as Emma tucked Lucy into bed, the little girl whispered, "I prayed every night for Mama to come back, but I think God sent you instead because you're exactly what we needed." The words hit Emma like a physical blow, and she had to step outside into the freezing air to compose herself, finally understanding that saving Will's life had somehow saved her own soul as well. Dr. Morris's December visit brought the first serious external threat to their fragile happiness. After examining Will, the doctor pulled Emma aside with barely concealed excitement. "Mrs. Carson, this is remarkable. His lungs are clearing. His weight is returning. I've never seen such improvement in advanced consumption." But his next words chilled her blood. "However, I must ask, have you been in contact with the Territorial Health Authority? There are laws about quarantine, about reporting infectious diseases. If word gets out that there was active tuberculosis on this property." Emma felt the ground shift beneath her feet as she realized the bureaucratic machinery that could separate their family, force relocations, or even remove the children for their protection. The very success of her nursing care had created a new kind of danger. The discovery of Emma's unmarried status came through Lucy's innocent chatter with a neighbor. girl whose mother had grown suspicious about the new wife who seemed to know so much about medicine. Word spread through the small community like wildfire. The woman caring for Will Carson wasn't legally his wife, was traveling with a bastard child, had been living in sin under the guise of marriage. Emma felt the weight of whispered conversations, and turned backs when she ventured into town for supplies. Saw the way Lucy's friends were suddenly unavailable for play. Witnessed Ben's confusion, as other children were called away from him. We could get the preacher, Will offered, weakly from his sickbed. But Emma knew the damage was already done. Their reputation was ruined. And in a small prairie community, reputation was everything. The crisis deepened when County Commissioner James Hartwell arrived with an official notice of investigation. A stern man with silver whiskers and cold eyes, he examined the cabin with barely concealed disapproval while making notes in a leather-bound ledger. "Mrs. Thompson, it has come to the county's attention that you've been cohabitating with Mr. Carson without benefit of legal marriage, exposing children to both moral corruption and infectious disease." Emma felt Lucy pressed against her skirts, saw Ben's wide-eyed fear, watched Will struggle to rise from his chair in futile protest. "Furthermore," Hartwell continued, "the Territorial Health Code requires removal of any children exposed to active tuberculosis to prevent further contagion." The words hit Emma like physical blows. Everything she'd built, everyone she'd come to love, could be destroyed by laws created by people who had never fought death with their bare hands. That night, as Emma paced the cabin floor, after settling the frightened children, Will attempted to offer her an escape from the scandal. "Take Ben and go back east," he urged, his voice stronger than it had been in months but hollow with defeat. "You've done enough, more than enough. I won't let them destroy your life because of my deception." Emma stopped pacing and turned to face him, her eyes blazing with the fierce determination that had saved his life. "Will Carson, if you think I'm going to run away and leave you and Lucy to face this alone, then you don't know me at all." She knelt beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "We're a family now, not because of any paper or ceremony, but because we've chosen to love and protect each other. That's worth fighting for." Outside, the wind howled across the prairie like a preview of the battles ahead. Emma's plan began to take shape as she drew upon every connection from her nursing days and every ounce of her natural intelligence. She wrote letters to former colleagues at St. Mary's Hospital, documenting Will's remarkable recovery with precise medical observations that would impress any physician. She researched territorial law in Will's small collection of legal books, discovering loopholes and precedents that might protect them. Most importantly, she began reaching out to other families in the area who had benefited from her informal medical care during her months at the ranch. Children she'd treated for fever, mothers she'd helped through difficult births, elderly neighbors whose ailments had improved under her attention. "If we're going to fight this," she told Will, "we need allies who can testify that what we've built here serves the community, not threatens it." The investigation hearing was set for Christmas Eve, a timing that felt like deliberate cruelty to Emma as she prepared for what might be their last days together as a family. She spent hours coaching Lucy on what to say if questioned, gently explaining to Ben that some people didn't understand their situation but that the love they shared was real and good. Will, his health much improved but his spirits, crushed by guilt, struggled with the knowledge that his deception in the letters had brought this disaster upon them all. "I was so desperate for help," he confessed to Emma. "I thought, if I could just get you here, if Lucy could have a mother figure, then when I died you'd stay for her sake." Emma cupped his face in her hands, seeing the man she'd grown to love despite never intending to. "Will, you saved us too. Ben and I were lost, alone, with no future. You gave us purpose, hope, family. Whatever happens, don't you dare regret that." The first serious threat materialized when Dr. Morrison received orders from the Territorial Health Authority to examine Will and make an official determination about the risk of continued contagion. Emma watched anxiously as the doctor performed his examination, knowing that despite Will's improvement, any trace of active tuberculosis could be used to justify separating the family. The doctor's findings would determine not just Will's medical status but the future of all four of them. When Dr. Morrison finally closed his medical bag and turned to face them, his expression was unreadable, and Emma felt her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. Lucy's small hand slipped into hers, while Ben pressed close to Will's side, and in that moment of waiting, Emma realized that regardless of the official verdict, they had already become something unbreakable, family forged not by blood or law, but by love and shared struggle against overwhelming odds. Dr. Morrison's crucial revelation came not in the form of a medical verdict, but in a confession that changed everything. Mrs. Carson, he said, using the title deliberately, I need to tell you something that I've kept to myself for 3 months. When I first examined Will in September, I didn't just think he was Dingjai, was certain of it. I've been practicing medicine for 25 years, and I've never seen someone that close to death recover. He turned to Will with something approaching. Oh, what this woman has accomplished isn't just remarkable, Nursing, it's a medical miracle. Your lungs are clear, your weight is normal, there's no trace of active infection. In my professional opinion, you are completely cured. Emma felt her knees go weak with relief and vindication, while Lucy let out a whoop of joy that made Ben giggle and Will's eyes fill with tears. For the first time since the investigation began, Emma dared to hope that their love might be enough to overcome the law's judgment. The arrival of an unexpected ally came in the form of Mary Patterson, the area's unofficial midwife and most respected woman, a sturdy woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and kind eyes. She had traveled from her homestead 15 miles away specifically to speak on Emma's behalf. I've delivered half the babies in this county, she announced to Commissioner Hartwell, and I've seen my share of good women and bad ones. Emma Thompson has tended sick children through the night, helped with difficult births, and never asked for payment. She's brought nothing but healing to this community. Behind her came a parade of other supporters, the Miller family, whose youngest daughter Emma had saved from pneumonia, the elderly Kowalski couple whose infected wounds she'd treated, the young Hendricks wife whose difficult labor Emma had attended. Each testimony built a picture of Emma not as a woman of questionable morals, but as an essential caregiver who had chosen to bind her fate to one family while serving many. Will's decision to take action, despite his weakened state, proved to be the turning point they needed. Struggling to his feet with Emma's help, he addressed Commissioner Hartwell with quiet dignity that commanded attention. Sir, I deceived Mrs. Thompson in my letters because I was desperate not for a wife, but for someone who could care for my daughter when I died. What I received instead was a woman who refused to let me die, who fought for my life when everyone else, including myself, had given up. His voice grew stronger as he continued. She could have left the moment she saw my condition. Instead, she stayed and saved not just my life, but my daughter's future and my ranch. If that's not the action of a true wife, then I don't understand the meaning of marriage. Emma felt tears streaming down her cheeks as Lucy nodded vigorously, and Ben looked up at Will with absolute adoration. The community's unexpected rally to their defense reached its peak when even the local preacher, Reverend Thomas Mitchell, spoke up on their behalf, a thin, scholarly man who rarely involved himself in controversies. He surprised everyone by producing a well-worn Bible and addressing the commissioner with quiet authority. Mr. Hartwell, I've watched this family from a distance, and I've seen the fruits of their union, children who are loved and cared for. A man restored to health through sacrificial devotion, a community that has benefited from acts of mercy and healing. While the law concerns itself with documents and ceremonies, God looks at the heart. He gestured toward the 4 of them standing together. I see here a covenant as real as any I've witnessed in my 30 years of ministry. Papers may make a marriage legal, but only love makes it holy. The murmur of agreement from the gathered community filled Emma with hope she'd hardly dared to feel. Commissioner Hartwell's final decision was postponed until after Christmas, but Dr. Morrison's private conversation with Emma that evening provided both revelation and hope. I've been thinking about your methods, he said as they walked outside the cabin to speak privately. The fresh air treatment, the nutritional support, the emphasis on hope and purpose, rather than simply waiting for death. These aren't just folk remedies, they're advanced medical thinking. I've been corresponding with doctors in Switzerland who are having similar successes with consumption patients. Emma's heart leaped as she realized the implications. Dr. Morrison, are you saying? I'm saying that what you've accomplished here could change how we treat this disease. I'd like to recommend you for formal training, certification as a frontier nurse. With your practical experience and natural talent, you could help many more families. The possibility of legitimacy, of turning her calling into a recognized profession, felt like a door opening to a future she'd never dared imagine. The major crisis arrived with the dawn of Christmas Eve. When Commissioner Hartwell returned with territorial marshals and official documents declaring his intention to remove both children to protective custody pending final resolution of the case, Emma watched in horror as Lucy clung to Will's legs, sobbing, while Ben buried his face in her skirts. Both children terrified by the sight of uniformed men with stern faces. "This is precautionary only," Hartwell announced, though his tone held no comfort. "The children will be placed in temporary homes until their legal status can be determined." Will stepped forward despite his still fragile strength, placing himself between the marshals and his family. "Over my dead body," he said quietly, and Emma saw in his face the man he had been before. Illness weakened him, strong, determined, willing to fight for what he loved. The standoff filled the cabin with tension so thick it was hard to breathe. Emma's desperate gambit came from a sudden inspiration born of desperation and love. "Commissioner Hartwell," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos with surprising authority, "I invoke the common law doctrine of marriage by mutual consent and cohabitation. Will and I have lived as man and wife for over 3 months, declared ourselves married before witnesses, and acted in all ways as a legal family unit." She grasped Will's hand firmly, drawing strength from his touch. "Furthermore, as Will's legal wife under common law, I assert my right to make medical decisions for him and parental decisions for Lucy, whom he has designated as my stepdaughter." The marshals looked uncertainly at Hartwell, who frowned as he consulted his legal documents. Emma held her breath, knowing that this desperate legal maneuvering might be their only hope of staying together. The transformative moment of crisis reached its peak when Lucy, despite her fear, stepped forward with a courage that took everyone's breath away. "Mr. Hartwell," she said, her 8-year-old voice steady despite her tears, "my real mama died when I was 5, and I've been taking care of Papa by myself ever since. I know what it's like not to have a mama, and I know what it's like to have one." She turned to Emma with absolute trust. "Mama M saved Papa's life, and she saved mine too, because I don't have to be scared anymore that I'll be all alone. If you take me away from her, you're taking away my mama again, and that's not right." Her simple, heartfelt words carried more weight than all the legal arguments and medical testimony, and Emma saw several of the men look away, their faces troubled by the child's raw honesty. Will's final transformation from dying man to protector was complete as he drew upon reserves of strength Emma hadn't known he possessed. Standing tall despite months of illness, he addressed the marshals with quiet dignity that commanded respect. "Gentlemen, I'm prepared to defend my family with my life if necessary, but I'd prefer to resolve this through law and reason." He presented papers he'd been preparing in secret: a legal adoption petition for Bent, a marriage license application, and a notarized statement of intent that predated the investigation. "Mrs. Thompson and I may have begun this arrangement unconventionally, but our commitment to each other and these children is absolute. I'm asking you to allow us to formalize what our hearts have already made real." Emma felt her breath catch as she realized the depth of Will's planning and the completeness of his recovery, not just from illness, but from despair. They stood together, united and strong, ready to face whatever judgment came. The final confrontation began at sunrise on Christmas morning, when Commissioner Hartwell returned alone to deliver his verdict. Emma, Will, Lucy, and Ben stood together on the cabin's front porch, their hands linked in a chain of solidarity that felt unbreakable despite their uncertainty. Hartwell's expression was unreadable as he dismounted his horse and approached them with official documents in hand. "I've spent the night reviewing testimony, consulting legal precedents, and frankly, wrestling with my conscience," he began. Emma felt Will's hand tighten in hers as they prepared to hear words that would either unite their family forever or tear it apart. Lucy pressed closer to Emma's side while Ben leaned against Will's leg, both children sensing the gravity of the moment without fully understanding its implications. Hartwell's unexpected admission revealed the human heart beneath his official demeanor. "Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Carson, I came here prepared to enforce the law as written. But I've witnessed something that transcends legal technicalities." He gestured toward the cabin and the family standing before it. "I've seen a woman who sacrificed her security to save a dying man and his child, a man who recovered not just his health, but his purpose, and children who are clearly thriving under unconventional but loving care." His voice softened as he continued, "I have grandchildren of my own, and I've seen too many orphans in this territory. What you've built here, this family, serves the community's interests better than any institution could." Emma felt tears of relief beginning to form. hardly daring to believe that their fight might be over. The community's final show of support arrived in the form of a Christmas morning gathering that took everyone by surprise. Led by Dr. Morrison and Mary Patterson, nearly 30 neighbors appeared at the Carson Ranch carrying food, gifts, and signed testimonials supporting the family's right to stay together. We decided that Christmas morning was the perfect time to celebrate what really matters, Dr. Morrison announced with a broad smile. And what matters is that this family has brought nothing but good to our community. Emma watched in amazement as their neighbors, people she'd barely known 3 months earlier, unloaded wagons full of supplies and surrounded them with embraces and declarations of support. Even some who had initially been skeptical had come to acknowledge the positive changes they'd witnessed in both Will's health and Lucy's happiness. Commissioner Hartwell's official decision was delivered with ceremonial gravity that made the moment feel historic. By the authority vested in me by the territorial government, I hereby recognize the marriage of William Carson and Emma Thompson Carson under common law doctrine, acknowledge Emma Carson's legal status as Lucy's stepmother, and approve the adoption petition for Benjamin Thompson Carson. Emma felt her knees go weak with relief and joy as the words sank in. They were safe, they were legal. They were truly a family. Will swept her into his arms despite still recovering his full strength, while Lucy cheered and Ben clapped his hands without fully understanding why everyone was suddenly hugging and crying. Furthermore, Hartwell continued with a slight smile, I'm recommending to the Territorial Health Authority that Mrs. Carson be recognized as a certified frontier nurse. Given her exceptional medical achievements, the climax of their struggle came not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet triumph, as Emma realized the full scope of what they had accomplished together. She had traveled west as a desperate single mother, with few options, and had become the foundation of a thriving family and respected community member. Will had been transformed from a dying man into a devoted husband and father, his ranch restored and his future secured. Lucy had blossomed from a frightened child caring for her dying father into a confident, happy little girl with a mother's love and a brother's companionship. Ben had found the father he'd never had and the security Emma had always wanted to give him. Standing together in their cabin that Christmas afternoon, surrounded by neighbors who had become friends and facing a future bright with possibility, Emma understood that saving Will's life had been only the beginning of the miracle they had created together. The new equilibrium established itself naturally over the following weeks as the Carson family settled into their legitimized life together. Emma found herself not just accepted but sought after by the community, her medical skills in constant demand as word spread of Will's remarkable recovery. She began making plans to establish a proper medical practice. With Dr. Morrison's enthusiastic support and Will's complete encouragement, Will himself regained not just his health but his passion for ranching. Making plans to expand the herd in spring and build additions to the cabin to accommodate their growing family. Lucy thrived in her new role as big sister and Emma's assistant, showing remarkable aptitude for both learning and helping others. Ben settled into ranch life with the adaptability of childhood, learning to ride and help with chores while maintaining his gentle, joyful nature. The establishment of their permanent stability was marked by Will's public acknowledgement of Emma's role in his recovery. At the New Year's community gathering, he stood before their neighbors and spoke with quiet eloquence about the woman who had saved his life through skill, determination, and love. I was dying, he said simply, and Emma refused to let me die. She didn't just cure my body, she restored my faith in the future. Emma felt her cheeks flush as applause filled the room, but more importantly, she saw the respect and admiration in the faces around them. These people had witnessed not just a medical recovery but a transformation of two broken families into something stronger and more beautiful than either could have been alone. The scandal that had once threatened to destroy them had become a testament to the power of love and commitment to overcome any obstacle. Their new equilibrium was complete when Emma received official certification as a territorial nurse practitioner, making her one of the first women in the region to hold such a position. The ceremony, held at the county seat with Commissioner Hartwell presiding, felt like vindication for every battle they had fought. Will stood proudly beside her as she took the oath. Lucy held her certificate with reverence, and Ben played quietly with his wooden toys, content in the security of a stable family. Mrs. Carson, Commissioner Hartwell said as he shook her hand, you've shown us all that sometimes the best medicine is simply refusing to give up on people. That evening, Back at their ranch, Emma and Will sat on their newly repaired porch, watching their children play in the yard, their own hands intertwined, their hearts full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them together, and the future that stretched ahead of them bright with promise. In the years that followed, the Carson family's story became legendary throughout the territory as a testament to the healing power of love and determination. Emma's medical practice flourished, and she became known as the Angel of the Prairie for her willingness to travel miles in harsh weather to treat the sick and injured. Will's ranch prospered beyond his wildest dreams, and he often credited his success to the energy and hope that Emma had brought back into his life. Lucy grew into a capable young woman who followed in Emma's footsteps, becoming her assistant and eventually pursuing her own medical training. Ben developed into a strong, kind man who combined Will's practical ranching skills with Emma's compassion for others. Neighbors would often remark that the Carson family seemed blessed, but those who knew them well understood that their happiness had been earned through sacrifice, courage, and an unwavering commitment to believing in each other when the rest of the world had given up hope. Emma often reflected on the miraculous chain of events that had brought them together as she watched Will teach Ben to rope cattle while Lucy helped her prepare medicines for their neighbors. The desperate mail-order bride arrangement that had seemed like her last option had become the doorway to a life richer than any she had dared to imagine. Will's deception about his health, which could have destroyed them, had instead led to the discovery of her true calling as a healer and the formation of a family bound not by convention but by choice and love. The community that had once threatened to tear them apart now looked to them as an example of what was possible when people refused to accept defeat. Dr. Morrison often brought medical students to observe Emma's techniques, and her methods for treating consumption were being studied and adopted throughout the region. Most importantly, the children she and Will were raising together understood that family was not about blood or law, but about the daily choice to love, support, and believe in each other no matter what challenges arose. On quiet evenings, when the prairie wind whispered through the wheat fields and the four of them sat together on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma would remember the broken woman who had stepped off the train that autumn day, carrying a frightened child and desperate hope in equal measure. That woman could never have imagined the joy that awaited her not just in Will's recovery and their love, but in the discovery that her greatest gift was not just the ability to heal Baptist, but to nurture the kind of faith that made healing possible. The mail-order marriage that had begun with deception and desperation had become a partnership that transformed not just their own lives but touched countless others throughout the territory. As Ben's laughter mingled with Lucy's excited chatter about her studies, and Will's hand found hers in the gathering twilight, Emma understood that their greatest achievement was not overcoming consumption or legal challenges, but proving that love, when coupled with determination and compassion, could indeed work miracles, creating families where none existed, bringing hope where despair had reigned, and demonstrating that sometimes the most unconventional beginnings led to the most extraordinary endings.